Oh, we return now to one of our top stories on the rejuvenation of Smith Street in Chinatown. A row of 13 shophouses there is up for tender to a single master tenant. It's all part of a plan to rejuvenate and inject vibrancy into the heritage area, and it appears to be on the right track. Other master tenants here in Singapore say that they've seen higher footfall at the spaces that they took over, with new offerings that they co-created with subtenants, attracting a wider range of customers. Now, some master tenants were also able to sublease portions of a property to other occupants. Now, still, they point out that there are challenges, like identifying like-minded tenants and convincing them to come on board. Aslam Shah with more.
This is how commercial building Westway used to look like. Now, it houses a variety of F&B outlets and spaces for events like live music performances. However, master tenant Orto says identifying the right mix of current tenants and getting them on board wasn't easy.
The biggest challenge is in getting in the tenants, because prior to us coming in, the place was very, very quiet. So they were also concerned whether it would make sense to invest in such a premise there. So it's trying to get the tenants in. And without getting the right tenants in, the whole place will not work out as well.
These were the same considerations another master tenant, DD Lifestyle, had before their wheels were in motion for the space at Gillman Barracks. It now boasts retail concepts they wouldn't have normally explored. This cafe sells drinks and pastries and is located within another shop that sells motorcycles. Now, this kind of retail concept is a collaboration between a master tenant and a subtenant on optimizing the use of this space.
Having this cafe space inside a motorcycle retail would bring in an audience that would not otherwise have stepped into a motorcycle retail. So we see that synergy.
Looking ahead, DD Lifestyle says it's looking at hosting a new suite of lessons and workshops at its space as consumer and lifestyle trends continue to evolve.
For more, we're joined here in the studio by Dr Lee Nai Jia. He's head of real estate intelligence at PropertyGuru. Dr. Lee, thank you for coming in this evening. First of all, the Smith Street area, why do we need to rejuvenate this area?
Right. So if we look at the Smith Street, the area, there's some kind of fatigue that has set in. I mean, the concept has been set off, in 2001, and also over the years, they have introduced new food concepts in that area. But I think that what happens is there's a lot much more that can actually get out of this area. The other thing is that the food street itself also faces challenges. There's a lot of other food options in the area. There's also some affordable food options at the hawker center. So to the operators, they also face a challenge there. So I think overall what happened is you see that the trade mix is changing. And there seems to be a kind of disconnect with the original intent. So I think this is a very good time for a refresh of the concept.
Okay, you can call it refresh. Someone who might suffer from this might call it the ill effects of gentrification, because gentrification could mean, as you say, add value. This becomes a posh, happening place. Someone makes money. But the people who have lived there and are used to paying less, they might now lose out because they can no longer afford to stay where they have grown up staying.
Yes, that is one of the possible outcomes that we may see in this area. But I think for this particular Smith Road area, we have seen that when things are becoming too expensive, it's also very difficult for it to flourish. So from a commercial viability point, there needs to be a balance where there's a certain level of affordability in the area for especially not only for tourists, but for the local population to come here, to entertain guests, to entertain their friends, and get engaged with each other. The placemaking aspect cannot be, the importance of the placemaking aspect cannot be overstated here. Yeah.
Dr. Lee, let's talk about what we know about this rejuvenation sort of effort. The tenure on offer will be 5 + 4 years. Okay, so this is a kind of a very specific quantum there. Is that common for that area? And what kind of businesses might be attracted to that?
Now, when we think about retail leases, they are usually 3 years plus 3 years plus 3 years, subject to renewal. Now, when we are looking at such an area, the key part here is that the investor or the master tenant has to invest quite a significant amount of money. The capital expenditure requires a much longer time. So I think in recent years, the government made a change in that to allow a longer lease term, at least for the first part, so that the master tenant could actually get back their returns and amortize their capital expenditure. So I think that gives the master tenants that kind of comfort level to invest more, especially at the infrastructure to make it successful.
Right, so 5 + 4 would be advantageous to most businesses?
I would say to most of the F&B concepts.
Okay, so still food and beverage.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so this master tenant, so changing what Dawn just asked you, that tenure is good for them. They're more likely to recoup the investment they have made. But how is this good for the area? So again, correct me if I'm wrong, master tenant, he's party to a direct lease with the owner, and then he then subleases all or part of that property to, I suppose, less master tenants.
Yes.
How is this good for the area that master tenancy becomes, I suppose, the principal way in which these places are rented out?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question. So there are two schools of thought. The first school of thought is, just leave it to the market forces. You have little sub-retail tenants. And then that kind of chaos actually brings out the beauty and the identity of the area. So that was the first school of the planning school of thought. The other one is, which we see works very well in the Singapore context, is actually kind of a master tenant, where the entity actually takes care of what is the right mix. So what is the good thing about this is that, it makes sure that certain spaces are being utilized well. They make sure the tenant mix is coherent and there's certain level of maintenance of the area. So generally, it helps bring up the area value. But of course, because of that, sometimes you lose that kind of chaos, that kind of spontaneity in the area.
Right, and that chaos, spontaneity, it supposedly brings back the vibrancy. That's what they want, but are they going to get it? The tender also mentions things like co-living, co-working, creative lifestyle. These are all buzz phrases, when it comes to developments and bringing back the sort of crowds that want to sort of hang out together,
yes,
work together, and so on. Is it going to add a lot to the cultural, to the commercial value in that area?
Now, when we think about, firstly, to make a place vibrant, you need people to stay there. Now, the current population is actually very mixed. At one side, you have the Duxton Pinnacle, which is a very young population. On the other side, you have a kind of a more elderly population there. So the key part here is we need certain vibrancy back. We need people to live in that area. So the co-living concept ties in very well in this sense because it makes it work, live, and play kind of environment to comes into place. Now, the question is, how do you tie it back to the heritage, the cultural values? Now, that is a very tricky part because when we look at today's context, our economy, the way things are moving, it's at a very fast pace. We no longer can go back to what it used to be in the 60s. So that is the balance. Rather than focusing on the type of activities, I think one of the key things is how do we blend in what's old and new together? And that's why I think the master tenant here plays a very important role. He needs to have a balance, give the kind of room for experimentation of new concepts, for entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs to test their culinary skill sets. I think that will be quite a very interesting way to make it work.
It'll be interesting to see how they manage all of this. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. for coming into the studios to share that with us. Dr. Lee Nai Jia, the head of real estate intelligence at PropertyGuru.